everyone. Welcome to the Ashley Barlow Company podcast. I'm Ashley Barlow, your host. If you are a parent, a teacher, or someone who works at a school, or you're a community member, a volunteer, or a staff member at an organization that supports people with special education plans, a coach, a tutor, or even a grandparent, you're in the right place. Sit back with an ice cold glass of lemonade, put on your walking shoes and grab some headphones, roll down the windows and cruise. Ready, set, go. Educate, advocate, collaborate. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Ashley.
I'm so happy to have you here. You guys, I want to introduce to you Amy Martin. Amy and I have been friends for 10 years, and I know that because Jack is 10 years old. Amy was Jack's physical therapist in his early intervention, which in Kentucky is called First Steps. And I remember we started First Steps without PT because Jack, even as a baby, was a pretty good motor guy. But one day he rolled over and he acted like it hurt his shoulder. And I was like, I need a PT and I need her now. And Amy came and she not only was like, I think his shoulder is fine, but she also was equally smart and caring. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's the whole picture. She like totally geeked out over this ligament thing or whatever it was that she was suspecting in Jack's shoulder. But she also was like super, super caring and sweet and just cuddled on my cute little deserving baby. And it just made me feel so good as a mom. So Amy's a physical therapist. She does work still in Kentucky's early intervention. And then she also has some school contracts. So she does some physical therapy for kids with disabilities that are in schools. And then she has this awesome business that I'm going to let her tell us about called Empower House. And Empower House does some therapies and some really cool classes and seminars and that sort of thing as well. So Amy, welcome to the Special Education with Ashley Barlow podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to tell you all about what I'm doing right now. Ashley, you have so much energy and always make me feel like I'm on the right track. So I am grateful for friends like you and for friends like Jack. I'm so grateful to get to do the work that I do. I do love it. And I think that makes the work less tedious and difficult. Although any of us who has a friend or a loved one with special needs knows that it is tedious and difficult to navigate this life when you've got these special challenges. But I think that's part of what I love about it is that you make connections with people that really are working from the heart and know that it really matters to people. So again, I'm very grateful to do this. And we just recently opened up a location. I've been doing home-based and community-based therapies for a long time through early intervention with Kentucky First Steps and with school-based contracts, which is very rewarding and really helps me see the whole gamut of, development from early intervention all the way through to adulthood. But the new location that we opened up, of course, in early 2020, in January of this year, has been kind of a dream come true. It's a beautiful location and it's got such great energy. And I really wanted this space to be available for people who needed to get out of maybe their situation and be in a place where they could, meet other people that are dealing with similar things and maybe engage in some enrichment activities like creative expression, dance, art, music, things that maybe motivate us to take things to the next level. To like help us find goals that really are meaningful to us. I have a background of being a dancer. I don't know how much you know about that, but before I got into physical therapy, was a dancer. And so I think that it was a bit selfish because I really wanted to incorporate more of that dance and creative part of my life into my work. And I thought, well, if I want to do that, I'm sure my friends do too. So, it really makes sense to me to get families and friends of kids with special needs, working together in different settings and with different types of people, so that we're all integrated and we're all learning at our own pace. And creative expression can be pretty pretty broad. You don't have to do it a certain specific way to make it meaningful and special.
Yeah. And, Amy, I think you do such a great job at, I've never thought about it this way, but putting the fun in the function as you're describing it, because you make kids work. I've never enjoyed in my personality, and then Jack's personality together is explosive, first of all. But in addition to that, we like to get stuff done, and Jack works best if he's really kind of put to the fire in these like intense kind of work periods. And you picked up on that right away with Jack and probably helped me identify it back when he was a baby, but you've always made it fun so that it's engaging enough that he doesn't mind doing it, and he in fact likes doing it. And I think that's a big key to movement for anybody, right? Like if you make it more fun and you put fun into the function, then it can be an expression of something that you're feeling, right?
Absolutely. And, in this, we hear more and more about social emotional learning and how important it is. And, in the school setting, we are frequently, we're looking at the whole child, but we're very goal oriented toward, academics and what they need to be successful when they graduate, in life and things like that. And so, when you really open it up to other things that really are fun and meaningful for us, I think it makes the work much more I don't know, agreeable.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It's more palatable for the child. So what
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you, I mean, you and I could talk forever about anything we do. We talk business, we talk parenting, we talk whatever. But what I think one of the things that you've taught me that's been the most helpful is I parent, and then also as I help other children across in my special education, law practice, and then if I'm just advocating for a child in an IEP meeting or something like that, is the concept of functional movement and adding functional movement to an IEP. And I'll tell you, it probably took me, I think I was a really firm believer in this when I had a toddler. And then maybe probably like midway through preschool to like early elementary, I probably took 2 or 3 years where I wasn't really as focused on that functional movement part of my parenting. And I think it did affect our I don't know if I want to say our progress, but it affected our happiness at home. So I think it would be helpful as you and I kind of talk about functional movement, if we started and you just kind of described for my audience what functional movement is.
Okay, so basically the nuts and bolts is functional movement is the movement and control that you need to have of your body to do a task, to do something that you want to do, or something you don't want to do. It might be your homework, but it's the movement. And it's not just how strong you are. It's also how well can you balance and control your body. How much can you stay focused on this task, but you functional movement is, for one person, it might be to be able to tilt your head to touch a switch to say hello. And for another, it might be being able to open a door or carry your tray, or stay seated in your seat while you're writing.
Oh, yeah, to have like the motor control to just sit there in a static way, right?
Right.
So then what does functional movement look like in a school?
So some of those things I just described would be included. and also, being able to walk in the hallways, to be able to stay in line, to be able to walk safely up and down the stairs, or to be able to climb on the playground equipment appropriately. It might be being able to wheel your wheelchair down the hall, or be able to get in and out of your seat or up and down from the floor without bumping into people, or just having it take a long time, or to be disruptive to what's going on in the classroom. I mean, the focus in the classroom is to be learning. So if you're struggling with those kinds of things, that can impede your learning. So
yeah, I mean, if you, like, I always tell people, so my Jack has Down syndrome, and he has low muscle tone as part of his Down syndrome diagnosis. And he also, so Jack is, I always say he's a gross motor guy, right? He is, but what's interesting is if Jack is in a language boom, his gross motor might not be that good. And if he's in like when he was little and he was in big gross motor booms, then he was pretty quiet. And I used to say, like, his body is only developing in one area at a time for the most part. And of course, lots of other things were happening, but it felt like if he was really working on, some kind of articulation thing, or a motor planning and speech thing, then we may as well forget about skipping for a little while or something like that. And so, but when I think about everything that his body has to do to work on to attend to a task, so like you said, sitting in the seat, for him to sit in a seat, he also has ADHD. So he has to regulate his body to say, okay, I'm going to not, I have to take charge of these impulses that I have to get up, to touch something, to move, to say something, whatever. And then with his tone, he has to engage the right muscles to sit appropriately. And then if it's a writing task and he's sitting at the table, he has to concentrate really hard on how he's going to hold the pencil, how much pressure he's going to apply to the paper, kind of all of those things. And that's before he ever reads a word or writes a word or does anything on that paper. I mean, there's so much work that goes into, I mean, I always say, like, heck, he has a lot of ENT stuff, so he has to literally think to breathe sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, like, for teachers to think about, and related service professionals and aides and everybody else to think about in a school setting, like, he's working really hard just to sit in that chair, right?
Right. Yeah, I think that is really, those are some good points, because, you take it for granted when it's easy for you, and it's not always easy for us. I mean, we know how it feels to be overtired, or like, I can't sit here one more minute. So maybe that is how these kids are feeling before they even get started, and so they do have to work really hard. And, there's going to be good days and bad days, and not to say that they can't focus on more than one thing at a time, like you were making the connection about, if he's working on motor or speech development, he might not be as motor. We still want to work on everything, but it's very good to just be aware of, and just to empathize with the all the stuff that's going on, and to remind ourselves, because I think it helps us just be more patient, basically.
Yeah. So I want to ask you two things, but the second thing that I want to ask you about is how we can use motor skills to help to regulate us in order to prepare for those functional skills that we need in school, like accessing the school environment by learning how to use steps, or having the skills to move your wheelchair down the hallway or something like that, because that's the big thing that you've taught me, is that even if it's a fine motor task, we might need to regulate ourselves with really, really specifically designed motor activities. But my first question is more about the supplemental aids and services that we would put into an IEP in order to support a child, so that they had some specially designed services or specially designed instruction that a PT or that an OT or the teachers could support in order to make sure that we continue to work on the skills that build the foundation for those functional motor skills, whatever those would look like. What do
Right.
we put into the IEP?
So some things that we will put in the IEP might be some like specific motor breaks throughout the day. You know, and PT is really great. OT is too, but PT is really great for coming up with these specific activities that will benefit that individual child, because all of us need motor breaks. We all know what it means to be sitting in front of a screen for hours, or at a desk for hours, and you know, you're like, oh, I just need to walk around, I just need to go get a drink of water, I need to look out the window. So those are things that maybe we need to build into some students' days more frequently, because they have more of a need for that. But we all understand what that is. And so you know, as a PT or an OT could help give teachers ideas of things to do that would really work on core, or would really work on their hand-eye coordination, or their eye convergence if they've been staring at a screen for a long time. You know, tossing a ball up and down, or tossing a ball and catching it is a great one to do. Um, and you know, just bending upside down, letting your vestibular system work a little bit. It can really recharge you. You know, we've known that for years with yoga, how that really makes us feel energized and like I can work again. So these are some examples of things that could be put into an IEP that would specifically help address concerns for an individual student. You know, a student that's struggling with balance might need to practice standing on one foot as a motor break throughout their day. That might be a good thing for them to do. But there's endless possibilities of things that you can do as motor breaks. But we know that, you know, getting up and moving your body just kind of helps reconnect the circuitry, like, okay, and kind of helps get your body ready for the next thing. You know, we kind of go in these cycles through our day. You know, we're high energy, low energy, and we want our energy level to match the activity that we're doing. So if we're watching TV or we're chilling out, you know, and cuddling, it's fine to have low energy. But when you want to be ready with that math answer, you need to be upping your motor a little bit, revving yourself up a little bit. And so, you know, some things that schools will do is use different kind of seating, like a bouncy seat. I'm sitting on a ball right now, if you could tell. But it just kind of helps keep your core engaged and helps keep you engaged in what's going on in class. It can also be very distracting for some students, so it's not for everybody. But that's an example of things that could go into
And
the
it's not for everybody all the time either, right? Like
right.
sometimes, you know, sometimes you want that box under your feet to give you good stability on the chair. And then sometimes you kick the box away because you're like, I've had enough with this box and I'm comfortable.
Right.
So,
And
yeah.
like, you know, we used a band on Jack's chair sometimes to let him kick the band, because that would help him just kind of get some energy out, and it wasn't distracting to anybody, and it wasn't unsafe. It was totally fine for him to do that so that he could just kind of stay focused and engaged. Some kids like to, you know, chew their pen, or like to tap their pen, or wiggle their foot. We all do that. We drink water, you know, things
I'm
to
playing
keep
with a pen right here.
right. So
As we're talking, I'm like fiddling with the pen, open, close. I've got the little tab that I'm playing with.
right. And so some of those things are socially appropriate, and sometimes they can be really difficult for people in groups to manage. So that's how we work case by case to make sure that we're helping in that specific scenario.
So, and you know, something that I like to tell parents is that I think it's really important to explain that the function of a certain behavior can even change during the behavior. And so sometimes we have to figure out like even if the behavior is just not wanting to sit in your chair, and the teacher really wants the child in the chair, and they're inflexible about even just, you know, maybe the child would stand up and work fine, but if the teacher really needs them in the chair for a specific reason, and the function today is a sensory dysregulation, tomorrow it might be attention seeking. And so if it's sensory dysregulation, then we might need that movement break. But if it's attention seeking, then the consequence, or the positive behavior support, if we try to catch it before it happens, would be something other than a sensory regulation or a movement break, right? Like we wouldn't be turning upside down in order to positively support the function of attention seeking before attention seeking happens,
Right.
right?
And you hit the nail on the head. And I think that is one of the trickiest things is trying to identify, okay, why is this happening? Is it because we need to move? Is it because we don't want to do this activity and we're trying to get out of it? Is it because we want attention? We want somebody to laugh at us that, that my friend over there just made eye contact and now I want to be silly, whatever the reason is. Identifying it is key,
Yeah.
to how you manage it. And I certainly cannot claim to be a behavior expert, but I know I have learned a ton from the behavior specialists and the special ed teachers and parents, and over the years, it's just very complex sometimes. But
Well, and behavior, I think that's a misnomer that you and I have talked about a whole lot. Not that you just said a misnomer, but behavior is human behavior. It's not bad behavior. So when we talk about, like, as you and I are talking about behavior right now, I mean, the example I just gave is the behavior of sitting in your seat to do a task. That's not a bad behavior. It's not a good behavior. It is just human behavior that sometimes we have to sit in a seat. And so the question then becomes, what supports do we need to sit in the seat? And I think that's a good example that parents can give of, sometimes, so if parents are asking for movement breaks, functional movement breaks and supported in the supplemental aids and services, then they might explain that, sometimes we need vestibular input, sometimes we need proprioceptive input, sometimes we need heavy work, sometimes we need some positive behavior support, the thing can change. But Amy, one thing that I want to make sure that you address is, so let's say we get movement breaks into supplementary aids and services. Does that mean that, like, let's say a child starts to show that they're getting antsy. So a kindergartner on the carpet during circle time and their hands start creeping towards somebody's hair, or they start like shimmying up against somebody. And so their aide or a teacher or somebody says, okay, time for a motor break. Does that mean they can like walk out one side of the library, take a 5-second walk and walk back in and sit down? Or like, what kind of motor breaks are we talking about when we build those in?
So usually it can be a walk, but typically what we would see is maybe something in the classroom where everybody stands up and does like a series of things that maybe they're familiar with. So that it's something quick. It depends on really what the teacher is trying to accomplish during that time. If they have time for a little bit longer break, or some time to teach the kids something, I think it helps just to recognize, for one, oh, we need to move our bodies because I am not able to focus on my work. So, teaching that routine, I think, is an important piece of it. So, when we get up, we might do some, a little dance or thing that might be on the whiteboard, or it could be
like a go doodle kind of a thing.
Yeah, like a go noodle, or it could be like 3 yoga moves, or it could be just standing up and taking some deep breaths, and keeping your body still for a minute. Although I think if this teacher probably would choose something more active in this scenario, I bet, than just standing still and taking some.
Yeah, but even like jumping jacks or something like that, I mean, I think that the point that you're making, and that I'm happy that you're making, is I see far too often in IEP meetings that teachers will say, well, we took them for a walk. And I'm like, well, taking them for a walk is great, but we need something that's going to re-regulate, which is definitely not a word, is going to regulate them, reorient them. And sometimes we have to look at what exactly they need. So if they've been on a screen, I loved your example, if they've been on a screen, then we need to resituate, however you said it in a PT way, but like rewire vision piece of your brain, which is really, really important to do before then you look out into the rest of the world for something. So what do we need to do specifically? I think that's really important, because far too often I hear them say, well, you know, first of all, they wait for the behavior to happen. Like, they started getting squirrely, so we took them for a walk. And I'm like, well, you know, what we need to do is we need to build in these positive motor breaks that are happening before it happens, before a behavior happens, hopefully, in order to prepare the child for learning, and then make a learning task that is an appropriate amount of time so that we can succeed, right?
Right.
And then also, then of course, we have supplementary aids and services that will specifically support the motor goals, whatever that is. So, you know, PT services can work on whatever.
You know, and I think getting back to what we were talking about earlier about making it fun, like I remember being a student in school, and when we would stop and do some kind of little fun game for 2 minutes, it would just help us all kind of reconnect. And you know, you hear the word about organizing, like it helps us get more organized, not just in our own bodies, but if you're doing it in a group, you can organize together and kind of feel that group energy, like we all did something fun together, and now we're all going to do this next, you know, learning task together. You know, it just kind of brings together that community sense too, I think. And I think, you know, if it can be a fun thing, that is just going to be the cherry on top.
Well, and you know, I think that's really important too, and that's a really inclusive practice. And so sometimes, you know, I say in my own family or in social circles that Jack's in or something, I say, you know what, Jack is telling me that he needs to move. And so how about if we all do the crab walk from here to there? And I think that's an important piece of self-advocacy too, for, you know, how great would it be if a teacher, if the family's comfortable with that kind of advocacy, if the teacher said, like I'm thinking back to when my Jack, we like to call it BR, before Ritalin, when he was really, really disorganized and dysregulated on a pretty frequent basis, and he would pull hair and he would really bump into a child in order to feel like he just really liked him, and so he'd really want to bump into him, which kind of looked like a tackle sometimes. And we had one particular teacher that would say, well, that's just Jack saying that he really likes you. And so, but you know what that's telling me is Jack probably needs a little break. So let's turn on a Go Noodle. And it was great because then the entire class did it, and it wasn't disruptive. It supported everybody else. She would do it at normal transition times and that sort of thing. But I always say one of the best things that she did was she helped to educate everybody else about Jack, which really benefits everybody in that classroom, which was really a beautiful, beautiful thing. And he's had a lot of lasting relationships that have come out of that classroom.
That's amazing. I love that because, you know, you're right about the things that we say. Our words have so much power, and if we frame it in a way that is negative, then that's going to be detrimental. You know, if we're framing it in a way, and we're educating, you know, all of us in the room really about what we think is happening here. We're you know, carrying on a discussion about, okay, this is what's happening, and so I think this is what we're going to try. You know, it just makes it less, I don't know, less of a thing. It's just a normal, let's, you know, I watched the Mr. Rogers movie recently, and one of the things he says is if it's mentionable, it's manageable. And so I really buy into that. You know, if you can have a discussion about it, we can get through it. You know, let's figure this out. So I highly recommend that movie. It's very good.
I might watch it tonight. Yeah, I've been looking for something that's kind of inspirational like that. You know, I oftentimes, this is totally a sidetrack, but just for a second, because you said that. See, this is what happens when you and I talking. But you know, so when I was in school, I graduated from high school in 1996. The special ed room was, you know, this like really dark room in my school. It had like knotty pine paneling in it. And it was like right by the cafeteria. So it was in this really weird place. And they literally had this really narrow hallway that led into the room. And I eventually volunteered in there, so I know that it opened up. it was kind of like Frank Lloyd Wright-ish almost. It was very, very narrow, and then it opened up. And so nobody could see what was happening in there. And like nobody ever talked about who went there or anything else. And it was kind of like, it was this mystery, like what's going on in there? And if we had talked about it, which is the way that I parent my child that's with a disability, that has disability, like, oh, Jack has Down syndrome, and this is what this means for Jack. If we had talked about it at that time, it would have been so much less mysterious, and we really could have made some better friendships and supported people better, especially in general education and whatnot. So that's really, I mean, to think of how far we've come in those, well, I said how, now I said 96, I can't do that math, but 20 something years, it's really impressive.
It is. It really is. And you know, I have a lot of hope that our kids are going to have a different, they will, they're going to have a different world that they live in, where there's a lot more inclusion and there's a lot more open-mindedness, I think, about what people can do, and just comfort level about, you know, yeah, we're different. It's okay.
Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful. We're different, and it's like, it's so cool. It makes the world so much more beautiful. Yeah, that's cool. So I love the idea of making the motor a part of that gen ed environment also. Um, so as we're talking about motor breaks and supplementary aids and services, one of the things that I see often in IEPs is that, and I kind of already talked about this a little bit, is that teachers will do it after the problem happens. Another thing is that they'll do it, they'll take them away. Like, well, you didn't earn your yoga today because you didn't have good behavior. And so I know that that's really detrimental for my own child. Why is it really important that those motor breaks for children on IEPs are not contingent on behavior or accomplishing a task or something like that?
Right. Well, you know, as we just discussed, if we're sitting and for a long period of time and we need to move and we need to do something in order to get through the day, that's what we do. But you know, if you're a kid with special needs, you may not always be able to ask for that, and so that's when you might see those behaviors happening. So it stands to reason that if you are just regularly giving the child doses of what they need, then you're going to alleviate the behaviors that may result as a, you know, not getting them. So the last thing you want to do is say, oh no, you don't get to take a break this time because you just goofed off too much. That's shooting yourself in the foot, and it's not helping anybody. You know, I think it's important to see those patterns, and you know, you're not going to catch it every time. You might push somebody too far and say, oh well, learn from that, you know, I guess we need to do a break sooner next time. But you know, if you just immediately go to, oh, they're just being a stinker, or they're just, you know, being difficult, then that's not helping anybody, you know.
Yeah,
It
as though
really,
you can control it, right? As though you could control your own regulation. And I think what you said at the very beginning is really key to that, Amy, and something that I have to articulate a lot in meetings, and that is that sometimes we're helping children access things that they either can't say they need or don't even necessarily know that they need. And so kind of like even going a little deeper in my own experience, sometimes we'll build in a motor break, and Jack won't access the motor break. You know, I'm the one that's dancing like a goofball, or I'm doing yoga and he's climbing underneath me or something like that. And so I actually have to work to get him engaged in the motor break, which is supposed to be not only fun, but more importantly, in his case, to really help to regulate him. And I'm like, come on, like this is for you. But I think a big key to that is having it consistent. So like if he knows, you know, right now we're obviously recording this during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so he's learning for the most part at home. And so we now have a totally great routine where we do 4 activities. Now it's 5, which is great. And then we do a go noodle. And then we do 3 or 4 more activities. And then we do a yoga sequence. And then we do a couple more. And then we do like some kind of OT game. like an orientation game, like a visual processing or memorization thing or something like that. And so he then knows our routine, which then makes him like, okay, yoga's coming up. And then he's more acclimated to the yoga. But I see a lot of times in school that it doesn't happen that way. Like the Go Noodle isn't always right after circle time, or the yoga only happens on Tuesday when the OT comes. And then the child doesn't, it takes a second to even get oriented for the yoga, and you miss some of, I mean, there's only so much time in the day, right? So
Right.
it's really, I think it's sometimes hard to like prepare yourself for the learning, even if it is supposed to be fun, even if it's a motor break.
Right, right. And it's very difficult sometimes to keep those routines going. But even if you're doing it most of the time, not every day, it may not work every day, but if you can have those routines in place, it does help. It helps all of us really
Yes.
to have those routines. And many times I think it's the role of the service provider, the OT, the PT, or the speech therapist to help those teachers that are maybe struggling with how to incorporate it or how to balance it. And that's a tricky line to walk. A lot of teachers have been doing this a long time. They've got their own experience and their own ideas about things. And so, you do have to walk the line between old school and what we are learning about development, what we're learning about self-regulation, and so it really has to be dealt with case by case.
Yeah,
And
graceful advocacy for everybody at the on the IEP team, right?
right, right. And I
Yeah.
think when that happens, it's a great thing, when you've got a collaboration of all the services and really thinking about what is going to be meaningful for this student. What do we need to do? Is it important for them to be able to do this goal, or is it more important for them to be able to manage themselves so that they can choose to do the things that they want to do rather than feel like impulsively compelled to do something that maybe is going to get them in trouble, you know?
Yes. And Amy, I mean, that's the whole reason that this podcast exists, that Ashley Barlow Company exists, that collaboration on the IEP team amongst the related service professionals that support the teachers, and the teachers that support the parents, and the parents that support the related service professionals, and kind of all of those arrows that go in all the different directions. We should all be supporting one another. And I always tell people, if you were on a team at work and the team had 6 or 8 people on it, and you only met once a year, but you were working on the project on a daily basis, you would have different communication. And so, I think what you just articulated is really important, because what it does is it talks about how you as the PT on the IEP team will support the general education teacher or the special education teacher, but you have to do it in a manner that that person's going to accept, because you could say it all you want, and unless they're receptive to it, then it's not going to work. And to me, so much of that has to do with sociology, right? We have to talk to every different audience member in a way that they're going to accept. And sometimes that makes it really, really hard at the table, because there's so many different personalities. And so if we can do that like on a person by person basis throughout the year, then we might be more successful. So I think it's really important that you raise that topic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Amy, we talked about a lot, and I'm so excited. This is really, really helpful information for people. I want to have you back because there's a couple more things that I know I want for you to share with my audience. So, I definitely think that we need to have you back to talk about social emotional support as that applies to movement. I think it would be super cool to have you come talk about some things that parents can do at home that could support learning at school. So will you come back sometime?
Of course, I'd be happy to. This has been so much fun.
Good. Okay. I know we could do this forever. Amy, how can my audience find you if they want to know more about Empower House, if they want to know more about you, especially if they're Kentuckians and they could actually use you.
Yes, yes. So we have a website, empowerhouseky.com. We're located on US 42, Highway 42 in Florence, Kentucky, 7536. And we are on Facebook, Empower House by Pediatric Therapy Specialist. I know it's a mouthful, but that is where you can find us on Facebook, and you can find me on Twitter at Amy or Amy Jean PT. So please reach out if there's anything we can do to help, because we love this work and we want to help you.
Oh, you are awesome. Thank you so much. And I am definitely going to see you soon, friend.
Cool. Yes.
And that will be a wrap for this episode. Thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Ashley.